Good morning, everybody. Curtis Wilkerson here with Inside Arkansas on the pod at the Palace with another episode of the Hogs video mailbag, where you ask me a Razorback basketball related question and I do my very best to answer it. We post one of these a day. We've had some really good ones, and today's is no exception. Let's get into this. This should be a fun one. It's from Jessica Davis. She says, if Cal was still at Kentucky and formed this exact roster, would we consider it a top of the SEC, nationally ranked team, or would we say that they'll have the struggles that BBN claims we are? I ran out of room on the graphic there, but the struggles that BBN is claiming, according to Jessica here, is that Arkansas is going to struggle to shoot threes. They're going to struggle with defense, and that the big men are too soft. Well, there you go. Here's what I'll say. We would never know, because Cal would have never assembled a roster like this at Kentucky. And I think that's why Big Blue Nation is a little bit salty over it. The doubt in Cal, honestly, has been about, like, has the game passed him by? Like, does he need to modernize his approach? And like him just relying too much on youth, which are valid. I think both of those things are valid. But this would have been a very unique roster for Cal to assemble at Kentucky. To answer your question, though, had he done it, I would think that BBN would probably be over the moon. I mean, you would have, three returners, key contributors from last year's roster who are a year older. You would only have three of those young freshmen to rely on, as opposed to 6 or 7. And you would have supplemented them with 3 top-end transfers, which is something that Cal didn't do very often in his time in Kentucky. He utilized the transfer portal, but not much. Oscar Tshiebwe was an interesting exception because that was kind of a mid-year deal, and then he wound up sitting. But if you think about like Kellen Grady, CJ Frederick, Antonio Reeves, who wound up being really, really good, but maybe not right away, wasn't the most heralded guy they brought in. Trey Mitchell, all those guys are solid, but he didn't really go the type of big game hunting maybe that you would have expected at Kentucky. So that just wasn't really a thing. I think they would have been irrationally excited over this team. Maybe I'm wrong. Could you imagine how BBN would be acting if Nelly Davis was going to Kentucky? And the number 1 overall transfer, an experienced, savvy guard with Final Four experience. Like, that's exactly what Kentucky's kind of been missing, is somebody in that backcourt with that type of big game experience. So yeah, I think they'd be really excited over that. As far as the big men go, like Jonas Adu, a guy who's had big games against Kentucky in the past, it's somebody that they're familiar with, who is an all SEC player, coming in and fortifying things around the rim. That is not a typical Kentucky under Cal transfer portal addition. I feel like they'd be really, really excited about that. And then bringing in a guy like Trevin Brazil, had he, he's coming back to Arkansas, and you got to think of it this way. There's going to be some sour grapes no matter what, with Cal making the move. And it's going to be a lot of, I told you so's, or just wait and sees coming from BBN, probably just like in some ways, except on steroids, the way that Arkansas fans might do with Muss at USC. If they get things rolling there. That's just kind of the way it works when one coach leaves one school to go to another, especially when it's interconference rivals like we have here, and especially with Cal, who's such a polarizing figure anyway. And given his situation and the way that it ended, I'm not necessarily surprised about that. So I wouldn't put too much stock into what they're saying. But as far as their concerns, I think some of them would be valid and would probably still be relevant, that they would be talking about. And some of them maybe not so much. Let's see. What did you mention there? 3-point shooting. I could see that being something that the BBN would still be talking about if they had this same roster over at Kentucky, because yeah, like last year, Kentucky shot the hell out of it from 3. They had the number 1 3-point percentage in the country. But the few years before that, they didn't shoot it particularly well from 3. It was a bit of a problem for them. And they had some low volume seasons as well. And given some of the things with Coach Cal's offense prior, with the dribble drive and the floppy sets or whatever, like, and kind of the personnel that he used, spacing was an issue at times for them. So I could see them looking at this particular roster and going, I don't know, like if there's enough 3-point shooting. I think Arkansas is going to shoot a good percentage. We'll see about the volume, but I don't think it's going to be a team like Kentucky had last year, where they're number 1 in the country in 3-point percentage. What else did you have there? Defense. Yeah. Well, that's been a big thing for Kentucky recently. They haven't defended worth a flip. They've just not been good. And for a couple years, it was because as good as Oscar Tshiebwe was on the glass and, around the rim offensively, if you got him in a ball screen, they were cooked. And Kentucky last season was very fundamentally flawed defensively. They did not cover ball screens well. They did not communicate well. Their rotations, their help, was all a little bit late. It was clunky. They were out of position. It was kind of a mess. And I think that this Arkansas team this year, or if it was a Kentucky or whatever, this particular roster has some better pieces. I think you've got some really good rim protection that can kind of mask maybe some of the issues out on the perimeter. I like Nelly Davis as a perimeter defender. I like Boogie Fland, even though he's a little bit undersized or maybe not as physically developed yet, but I think he's a pest on the ball. I think he can do a good job of getting in the passing lanes. DJ Wagner, I think, is an underrated on-ball defender. You got the pieces there, but how fundamentally sound and in sync are they going to be as a team? Yeah, I would imagine that BBN would still be concerned about what it's going to look like defensively and the type of improvements they'd make. The thing about the big men being soft, that kind of cracks me up. There's this weird narrative about Jonas Adu, I think, being soft because he struggled at times against some of the best centers in the country. He wasn't very good against Zach Edey. Who was? Chandler Lawson, I guess, is the answer there. Ryan Kalkbrenner, one of the best big men in the country. Tolu Smith. Tolu Smith gave Arkansas fits for felt like a decade. And so, yeah, I mean, like you'd like to see him maybe take a step forward, handle physicality a little bit better, but to call a guy soft who was an all SEC center and was third in the league in, block shots, fourth in the league in rebounding, I don't know that soft really applies there. And the deal with Big Z, I think just a lot of context is needed with him. We're talking about a guy who was a freshman last season. He was sick. He joined the team late. He wasn't eligible until the middle of SEC play. There were a lot of reasons for Big Z to have struggles, but if you're telling me that you couldn't see the potential that was there and just the thought of him having a full offseason and being settled in and having a full preseason and being with the team right out of the gates, if you don't see a pathway to big improvement there, I think you're kind of crazy. And he doesn't need to be a big bruising brute force. He's 7'2" and he moves very well. Yeah, he's got to get better defending ball screens. Most guys his size do, but he is a good rim protector. He's a factor just with his size alone around the rim. And his game, his strengths, he's unique. He's versatile. He's a great passer at his size. He can knock down threes. He can do things that guys that size don't do. And so would they be, worried about them being too soft on the interior, or would they be excited about the potential and the things they bring to the table elsewhere? I think it would maybe lean a little bit towards the latter there for sure. But that's what's going to be so fun, I think, about this rivalry as it continues to build. And once we get into the season, if both teams are really, really good or one solid and one struggling, here's what I do know. Cal ain't gonna be able to make a single mistake or take a single L without BBN going crazy on the man. And social media is going to be electric. I cannot wait to be in Lexington for that game. The national perception, I think, of this team, to go a little bit deeper into your question, I think that they would probably be thought of a little bit higher. But again, I think even not just BBN, I think the national perception, if there's some doubts around Arkansas, part of it is, well, has Cal lost his fastball? Can he get over the hump in the NCAA tournament? I think we're seeing some reasons to think that he might be adapting with the way he's built his roster, and in terms of depth, in terms of not relying so much on youth, embracing the transfer portal more. Those are all good signs, but you don't know for sure. But there is this narrative out there that teams that don't have any continuity really struggle. And everywhere I look, I see, well, Arkansas only returns one player off last year's roster. This is true. Trevin Brazil, but Calipari brings almost his entire staff with him. He brings several guys who contributed and who played for him 1 or 2 years on that roster. There's more continuity, I think, than it lets on. So from that standpoint, I think if you looked at it and you said, okay, Kentucky has DJ Wagner, Adou Thiero, and Big Z all back in the fold, and then they've added 3 5-star freshmen and 3 of the top transfers in the country, they would probably be a little bit higher on Kentucky than they are at with Arkansas from that standpoint. But that was a good question, fun one. I appreciate that. You've had some good ones that have come through lately that I'm looking forward to getting to. So appreciate you, Jessica, and appreciate everybody. Continue to pour those questions in on my Twitter profile at Kurt Wilkerson _ got a thread pinned at the top. You can get your questions in there. Hop in if you watch these YouTube videos, throw questions in the comments section. I'll make sure that I get to them. We're going to post one of these every single day, 8 a.m. until the start of the college basketball season. So make sure you get subscribed at Inside Arkansas. Follow along the Hoop Hogs video mailbag playlist. That way you know when those things come through every day. And we'll be back for another one of these tomorrow. This has been Curtis Wilkerson with the Pod at the Palace. Everybody have a great day, and we will see you soon.